We currently have an intense energy condensation, and this has created an effect that causes processes to be naturally pushed to the surface. And that's pretty intense. And this has been going on all of last week. Of course, it was happening before as well. It's been a huge boredom for a long time. But we are currently in an absolute deep phase of condensation, a peak phase as far as processes are concerned. And it can, of course, happen that you get really thrown around. And to be fair, I'll say right away, this podcast episode today is not for those who say, "Oh, I feel so great and I could bathe in happiness and sunshine all day." Because we currently have a very, very significant and extremely positive opportunity in our ascension wave. For all those who are not feeling well right now, for all those who are currently feeling the most intense blockages within themselves, where they realize, "Oh, actually, I have had these more or less all my life, and I just can't get rid of them." Because we now have the chance, through this energy condensation, to use, let's say, the spiritual crowbar, the spiritual lever, and really pry something open here. This is a very, very cool thing that's happening right now. I'm curious to see what you think about it. I find it really crisp. It's fun once you understand what it's actually about. And I want to break that down for you in this podcast episode today. Welcome to your Live Happy podcast. My name is Linda Giese. For over 20 years, I have been a spiritual mentor and the author of the book Consciousness Next Level, which is highly recommended for the ascension process, for your ascension process. I have linked it in the text for you. And I am also the founder of the Being Potential Method. You can find out what that is and how it can help you by following the link in the show notes. There, I invite you to our next free live show. It's best to bring your biggest problem directly, as we will work on it together. All of this is free and without obligation, with lots of joy and fun. So definitely not a 15 webinar, but really rock and roll. Positive change in your life. So let's get started. Positive change in your life, that's going to be our keyword today. Because it might be that you're really noticing right now, wow, I'm reaching the limits of my lack of self-esteem. You might feel like you just want to throw everything away and do absolutely nothing for 3, 6, or 8 months to find yourself. You might feel that you are massively overwhelmed or that an immense wave of sadness is engulfing you, with or maybe even without reason. It may be that issues from the past pop up. It may be that you are perhaps powerfully challenged, for example. Someone is trying to manipulate, blackmail, or harass you in any conceivable way. And you just feel, wow, what now? Dear God, what exactly am I doing right now? Yes, it may be that you feel you are indeed reaching the limits of your spiritual concepts, or conversely, that you truly feel your spiritual concepts are limiting you, so you come into contact with that. I believe I have forgotten quite a lot. We also like to talk about heartbreak. We also really enjoy discussing how you might notice that things are getting financially tough right now. So basically everywhere where it gets down to the nitty-gritty, physically as well. Of course, these are also clearly insights that resonate on an interpersonal level. So basically the full program, broad and really nice and holy. It's about using holistic and holy, ultimately about healing. And specifically, healing exactly where it hasn't healed in you yet. So, which blockage hasn't healed in you yet? Before you finish listening to the podcast, you can put it in the comments. What do you think? Which blockage still needs to be healed in you? Yes, what is happening right now at this very moment? You are ultimately and inevitably being confronted with the areas where it is most challenging and difficult for you to act or behave differently, to react or respond differently, to adopt or embrace a different perspective, a different way of feeling or experiencing than before. So it is really clear that you are now treading new paths, paths that you have avoided until now because they simply did not fit into your belief system, into your concept, into what you were taught, because they were outside your perceived comfort zone, that you are now taking these paths. For example, if you find it incredibly difficult to say no and set clear boundaries, then you will have a primal emotional wound that originated early in childhood. This emotional wound resulted from not being seen or heard, being made to feel guilty or ashamed, having your needs and desires unrecognized, and simply learning to adapt and survive in order to avoid and not feel the pain of rejection. You have indeed learned not to contradict others, to make sure not to hurt others. Yes, and you learned very early on that your own needs, your own opinions can hurt others. Yes, which is nonsense. Today you know it, but you just can't get rid of this blockage. So it might be, for example, that you are currently encountering a life situation or perhaps a person who practically challenges you to become someone you have always shied away from being, yes, to really push through hard. Even though that person is undoubtedly, in this situation, asking you not to do it, indeed. Maybe also highly manipulative, setting up a scenario of suffering just to force you to hold back yourself and your needs. And yes, ultimately, in the end, play along the way he wants. And yes, it may be that you simply notice, for example, let's take the financial blockage example because we mentioned it earlier, where you just feel like nothing is moving forward, nothing is happening, and you feel like you are completely on the wrong path. Or you also notice that professionally, things just aren't working out anymore. And you just feel like you want to throw everything away. But ultimately, this is not about giving up. It's about becoming who you wanted to be. Yes, become braver, become more confident, move forward instead of backward. And I can actually say this for all blockage topics. It's not about withdrawing again. Yes, giving in again, adapting again, taking the lower path again, or closing your heart and retreating into your shell. No, we are talking about the spiritual crowbar, the spiritual pry bar. Go through it, step into your true greatness, and just let go of all spiritual concepts. Because I really have to say, as a spiritual mentor, the spiritual concepts are an absolute plague. Yes, because they prevent us from coming into our power in the first place. Once we are in our power, when we have resolved our blockages, when we are self-empowered, because spirituality indeed primarily means the ability to lead oneself. Yes, if we have achieved that, then the spiritual, often very lofty in terms of high-quality concepts and noble orientations, can actually take hold. If you start this too early, they are usually obstacles to solutions, growth, etc. So, whether you are dealing with it on an emotional, mental, economic, health, friendship, or partnership level, if I forgot something, please add it yourself. It's about pushing through now, yes, and not letting anything or anyone stop you, especially not your own self-doubts and perhaps also hesitations and concerns. Yes, it definitely means stepping out of the comfort zone, and this will be the case for an incredible number of people now, because this will now resolve blockages. Yes, so I can give you a very simple example from my own experience. I could also use customer examples, but I prefer to use my own. I currently have someone in my life who really pushes me into the victim mentality. So, what is the victim mentality? That really drives me up the wall, making me feel incredibly frustrated and agitated, and it makes me want to act exactly the way she wants me to, even though I know I shouldn't. And I find it really, truly incredibly difficult to push through because I am anything but unfeeling, inhumane. Those who know me know that. Those who know me know I can follow through. But in this regard, I find it incredibly difficult. It simply has to do with the fact that, as a child, I learned early on to adapt and to align myself like a seismograph to the needs and moods of others. Yes, with two narcissistic parents, that was simply my absolute survival pattern. Yes, and with my self-confidence and self-worth, it took decades until I got to know my being potentials. Once again, my invitation to our free live show. So until I got to know my being potential method, my self-confidence was absolutely in the basement. And everyone who thought, wow, she is really confident, fell for my absolute fake self, because I was anything but confident. Sometimes I could pretend, but I wasn't. And yes, this issue of being incredibly, very, extremely reluctant to offend others, or believing that if I stand up for myself, I hurt others, still clings to me, especially when it comes to people who have done a lot of good and kind things for me. Indeed, this is truly a persistent issue. Yes, and I am also very tolerant. I don't always have to get my way, but in this case, someone is holding up a mirror for me so that I can recognize that I still have something to clean up within myself. Because here, boundaries are extensively crossed, stories are distorted, and scenarios are constructed in various ways, including massive manipulation and blackmail. Yes, also things like, oh, I can't live with this, I don't want to live with this, my fate is in your hands, and so on. Well, I have to be honest, that's enough. And even I recognize at that point, wait a minute, something isn't right here. Yes, it's a story that has absolutely nothing to do with me. And now I'm supposed to somehow step in and make this story my own. And then with the argument that otherwise I will leave this life. And I have to be honest, this is where my own anger starts to build up slowly, because I just say, hey, stop, yeah, don't make me feel like crap, because you don't have your life under control. And that's where I simply say stop. And why am I telling you this? I'm not just simply telling you this because it's my story. No, I'm telling you this because this energy is currently so massive in the field. Everyone who deals with toxic relationships or difficult people in life, people who, for example, sometimes, even in the workplace environment or with highly choleric individuals, that is to say, people who very easily fall into such toxic behaviors. Those who have to deal with them will most certainly agree with me that we are currently experiencing a phase where such individuals are once again fully displaying their entire range of behaviors and tendencies. And we don't need to point fingers because we can be very, very grateful to these people or these situations. So let's come back to this again. What is this really about? It's about healing, right? So, if you're affected by any field in this form or something similar, feel free to write it in the comments. Keep in mind that others will read it too. Yes, but if you feel comfortable, please write your story in the comments. I know it really helps you all when you exchange experiences with each other, because right now it feels like there's a real chaos going on. Yes, indeed. It's a kind of truly devilish energy that really incredibly puts you to the test, and it's incredibly challenging. Are you truly ready to take the next important step in your spiritual growth? If so, then the spiritual crowbar, the spiritual lever, is applied. And then, and this is the exciting part, nothing is done to you at all. You yourself then, in fact, break the blockage because you do something actually completely different than usual. Yes, indeed. Let's get back to my example. As a matter of fact, I am often the one who understands everything and grasps all the connections, and who can rightfully say, okay, I will help you now. My needs are not that important. Let's focus on you. And here it simply means saying no and clear up your own crap, because I have nothing to do with it. Quite the opposite. You are fundamentally harming me with it, and now you want to blackmail me into understanding and essentially taking on your mess and basically figuring out how to live with it. Yes, it's a bit of an extreme example. I won't say more about it, but I think all those affected are noticing it in their own lives right now. The examples are quite extreme, and it is also shaking us up emotionally. Emotional is the next keyword. Just look at how you ultimately feel. Make sure to detach yourself from the story it's about, because it's ultimately just a trigger. You could also say a signpost that simply says, this is the way, this is where you need to look. And so it doesn't help to take down the signpost, right? But rather you should just take a look at where it's pointing. And there you will feel something resonating within your body, maybe experiencing pain, sadness, fear, whatever. Yes, get to the bottom of those feelings, and you don't have to immediately bring out the big broom and sweep them away, yes, but rather take it step by step. Maybe you finally give yourself some time to just sit down and be with the feeling you're experiencing. Yes, maybe you allow yourself to feel okay with whatever you're feeling and stop rejecting yourself for it, and just stand by yourself, yes. Not leaving yourself alone anymore. Yes, because normally when we feel bad, we immediately abandon ourselves, wanting to get rid of the feeling, either by distracting ourselves or doing everything to not feel that way anymore. Really. What is it at its core? At its core, it's like, I find you totally crappy the way you are, and I don't want to have anything to do with you. Yes, that's how we usually treat ourselves, and that's why we can't resolve our blockages. Because if we turn away from ourselves, how are we supposed to resolve the blockage? We can do as much energy work, affirmations, or anything else as we want. If we don't stand by ourselves, nothing will happen. Yes, now you also know why it might not have worked out until now. It's no problem. Now you know better. Now you can approach it differently. And don't be afraid of all those out there who are currently standing in your way. They do it unconsciously, but they do it out of love on a higher level so that you can recognize where you need to look. So, no one needs to be shot. Ultimately, they are just signposts showing you what it's all about for you. I hope the episode gave you something. I hope it was coherent for you. I hope it also motivated you. Yes, because as dramatic as it seems, as you can see, it's not that bad. It's all for your best. And I'm really looking forward to your comment. I would be happy if you also follow me on Instagram. And of course, I am especially delighted if you come to our free live show. Remember, right the problem, left the problem. You can definitely bring it along. We have plenty of capacity to help some of you live. What else is there left to say? With love, the very best for you, your sister in spirit, your Linda.